The Story Vault presents Gold Rush, Episode 2, The Harder Path. The morning air is crisp, carrying the distant call of a crow as the last embers of the campfire smolder in the pit. A breeze rustles through the trees, kicking up dust along the dry earth. The steady, rhythmic scrape of metal against stone cuts through the silence, sharpening steel, slow and deliberate. Nearby, the sits on an overturned crate, her hands idle in her lap, fingers tracing the worn edges of a small, tarnished locket. The fire's dying glow flickers across her face, but her eyes are distant, fixed on something far beyond the horizon. Another drag of the whetstone, a slow scraping sound. "You're quiet this morning," comes the low voice of her father. His tone is steady, but there's something knowing in it, something that says he already knows what's coming. A beat of silence. "How long we gonna keep chasing dirt?" The wet stone stills. A faint breeze whistles through the trees, stirring the horses where they're tethered nearby. The man sets his pickaxe down, leaning on his knee, considering his words before he speaks. "Gold don't find itself, sweetheart." A pause. "And what if we never do?" He watches her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then, without a word, he reaches into the saddlebag at his feet, pulling out a folded, weathered map. He holds it out to her, his rough fingers pressing the edges. "If you're serious about that question," he says, "take this. Ride out to the old camp. See for yourself." The paper crinkles as she takes it, hesitating just a moment before tucking it into her coat. She stands crossing the clearing with quiet purpose, boots crunching over dry leaves. The horses stir as she approaches. She swings into the saddle, adjusting the reins. Her father doesn't say a word as she turns the horse toward the trail. And then she's gone, hooves drumming a steady rhythm against the hard-packed dirt. Her father's watchful gaze lingering long after she's disappeared into the trees. The mining camp is a skeleton of what it once was. The wind moans through broken beams and torn canvas, scattering dust over abandoned tools. Rusted shovels lean against splintered wooden posts, forgotten by the men who once wielded them. A hollow quiet fills the space, thick and unsettling. Swings down from her horse, boots sinking into the dust as she surveys the ruins. The wind whistles softly, rattling the remains of a tattered tent. She steps forward, careful, slow. Her eyes scan the ground, searching. Something half-buried catches the light. Kneeling, she brushes away dirt and loose gravel, revealing a small wooden box, weathered by time. The wood creaks as she pries it open. Inside, a rusted revolver, dull with age, and a folded scrap of paper, a map, different from the one in her coat. A twig snaps. The breath stills in her chest. Her hand tightens around the wooden edge of the box. Silence. She turns sharply, scanning the ruins. Nothing, just the wind, the empty tents, the forgotten tools. She exhales, tucking the map inside her coat before reaching for the revolver. The weight of it feels strange in her grip, unfamiliar. She slides it into her satchel, rising quickly, striding back toward her horse with a new urgency. The saddle creaks as she swings up, kicking the horse into motion. She doesn't look back. But as dust rises in her wake, a shadow shifts on the ridge above. A figure stands there, watching. The town of Dustwater hums with the restless energy of a frontier settlement. Wagon wheels clatter over dry, packed earth. The air is thick with the mingling scents of horse sweat, tobacco, and sun-baked wood. Near the general store, the drifter leans against a wooden post, idly flicking a cigarillo between his fingers. His hat is pulled low, shadowing sharp, unreadable features. The ember at the tip glows faintly as he takes a slow drag, his piercing gray eyes lazily watching the street through the haze of rising smoke. Boot steps scuff against the wooden planks of the boardwalk. A stranger strides forward, his long coat dusted from the trail. His polished black boots strike the wood with steady precision. His pristine Stetson sits firm atop his head, the brim upturned slightly, revealing sharp blue eyes that scan the town without hurry. His dark hair is slicked back, neat despite the dust, a trim mustache sharpening his already severe features. He stops at the general store, a weathered wooden building with an overhanging porch, its counter pushed up against the open street. The storekeeper leans lazily against the worn wood, watching. His slicked back hair is thinning at the edges, his narrow brown eyes flicking up from the ledger in his hands. A thin mustache twitches as he adjusts his vest, stained white shirt stretched a little too tight over his stocky frame. His fingers idly rub over the gold ring on his hand, a nervous habit. The stranger places a gloved hand on the counter, fingers tapping once before going still. His voice cuts through the midday quiet, calm, measured, certain. "I'm looking for someone, a man who doesn't belong here." The storekeeper hesitates, just for a second. Across the street, the drifter exhales smoke, watching. He doesn't move, he doesn't react, but he listens. A murmur of conversation inside the saloon, the sound of paper unfolding, a hushed pause. Then, "Wanted," the stranger says, his voice edged with certainty. A pause. Then, with the slow, deliberate ease of a man with nowhere to be, he turns and steps toward the saloon doors. The river runs steady, the sound of rushing water blending with the rhythmic clink of metal against stone. The old-timer hums an old tune under his breath, swirling water in his pan, watching for the telltale glimmer of gold. His boots shift in the mud, his fingers tapping absently against the pan's edge. A flicker of light, just a sliver. He grins, lifting the pan slightly. Then, something moves, a sound, not the wind, not the river, something else. The hairs on his neck prickle. He stills, turning slightly, peering toward the trees. Silence. Just the rustling of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl. Still, something lingers. He exhales, shaking his head, muttering under his breath as he turns back to his work. But behind him, deep in the shadowed tree line, something watches. The fire flickers low in the camp as wings from the saddle, her face set in quiet thought. She runs a hand over the folded map in her coat, fingers pressing against the worn paper. The wind picks up, stirring dust along the trail behind her. Somewhere in the town, a saloon door swings open, boots stepping onto wooden planks. By the river, a man grips his gold pan just a little tighter, gaze lingering on the darkness beyond the trees. In the distance, something stirs. The night is heavy with unspoken things. If you enjoyed this episode of Gold Rush, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the Wild West. Stay tuned, because out here, the gold ain't the only thing worth chasing.